Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barnard. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Brian Goudie. He's the executive chairman at Aurora Payments. Now, by providing secure payment solutions, Aurora has built a portfolio of more than 29,000 small and medium-sized merchants that together process $12 billion a year. Brian is also a small business owner in his own right, so he understands firsthand the business challenges that his clients are facing. So, hi, Brian. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Hey, Kelly. Thanks for having me. It's such an exciting topic, payments. I'm sure you're thrilled to have me.
Well, to this crowd, it's definitely exciting. Before we dive in and start talking about this thrilling subject of payments, tell us a little bit more about you. What might it be interesting for people to know about your professional journey to this point?
Sure. And first of all, you and I are talking here and you've got a Boston Public Library sign behind you there. So you and I figured out we're both from Massachusetts in our conversations before this podcast, which is great. Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts, one of 9 kids, which with a single mom. So I guess with that, it teaches you to be scrappy. You don't sit around and wait for what you want to get. You better go hustle it yourself if you want your laundry done. Mom's not going to do it. So grew up in Massachusetts. Today I have 5 kids. So I guess I'm tied to these big families. Tried to catch my mom. She got 9. I couldn't quite. She won that race. I tapped out at 5. But I interestingly spent about 30 years. In 1995, there was a buddy of mine in Boston. We kind of had like our Cheers bar, which was called the Rattlesnake Bar and Grill in the Back Bay of Boston. And there was a guy. There was a group, and one of the guys worked for Diners Club. He was running around the streets of Boston trying to get restaurants to accept Diners Club. And I was ready for a change at that time, and he was going to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, to work with a company called First Data and a bank called Wachovia Bank, which I don't think I knew either of those at that point in time. But he was bullish on the fact that I would do well in sales, and my brother had gone to Davidson College. So I knew a little bit about the Charlotte area, and this was when winter was commencing. I think it was like October. And the thought of another Boston winter, I think at that time I was ready for a change. So off to Charlotte I went to go work for this Wachovia Bank doing payment processing. And you asked maybe how I'm unique. I'm sure people would say lots of things about me being unique, probably not nice either. But I think what I would say where I'm a little bit unique is I started out truly as a sales person on behalf of the bank. I worked a little bit in Charlotte, but then my main territory was Raleigh, Durham, Cary, for people familiar with the RTP area. So I was 15501 as the route connecting Durham and Chapel Hill, and that was my territory. And so starting out as an individual contributor, selling merchant accounts to small businesses, to reporting to the CEO of First Data, multiple CEOs, I guess the height of my career there, I was running North American acquiring and reporting to the CEO. There weren't a lot of people, I don't think, at that table that had my pedigree as being a salesperson, getting to that place. So I guess to me, that's what made it unique for me to be in that position with that pedigree.
And I mean, it's interesting when you think about it. In some ways, all of us are in sales, right?
Oh, yeah.
Are you formally given the training? Do you have the natural aptitude for it? But I don't think there's any position in the world, even including families, you talked about those big families, where we're not in sales some part of the time, right? So that is definitely an advantage that I'm sure you've seen. And now being on the payment side of things, it to this audience absolutely is an exciting topic. And I'm sure it's one where if you focus on it, there's a lot of change and nuance that has happened that people who aren't necessarily dedicated to it might not notice. What are some of the most dramatic changes that you've seen play out over your 3 decades in the space?
Yeah. And by the way, I love your comment. And anybody who works for me will know at town halls, I always say everybody's in sales, whether they want to be or not. And if you in our world, I speak for every other industry, but oftentimes, at least I do say this to our folks, if you're in our tech support or customer service, you'll have more interaction with that client than often the salesperson ever had. So every call is an opportunity to solidify a relationship or kill a relationship. And unfortunately, that burden is often borne by platform folks, that have interactions. So I do love your comment, and it is 100% spot on.
Can you tell I was raised by a sales guy?
That's
how
good.
I ended up in procurement, I do not know, but I
Great.
definitely have a lot of respect, especially for people that sort of like lean into the sales skill set and are really effective at using it.
Yeah. Back to your question, like I've been in this industry now for 30 years, and what are some of the more significant changes in the evolution of payments? I would say, and I was there. I recall, I want to say it was 2011 or 2010. We were in Cleveland, I think it was. And there was a payments conference, and the keynote speaker was a guy named Jack Dorsey. And I don't know, he was the CEO of Twitter. I don't think anybody necessarily knew who he was at that time, but it was an interesting speech. I always remember it as he was crushing the payments people in the audience. And I'm not sure everybody in that audience knew that they were getting crushed, but I think his top line message was the lack of transparency, the complication of it. Very much about complicated. I think he referenced having some small businesses, and it's very complicated. The pricing isn't very transparent. It's hard to follow. And, at that time he came out with, if people remember, like dongles that would clip into a phone, and that was it. And it was always flat rate. I think he would do $269 or something was the price, right? That was the deal. And that, I think, again, I can't pinpoint it to Jack Dorsey, but what I do know, if you look it up, is if you think about the venture capitalist Palo Alto group in the mid 2010 to 20, probably around 2014, there was more investment coming out of venture capital and private equity into payments than I believe the stat was something like 15, 20 years. And I believe it, because if I go back to when Dorsey was on stage, I worked at First Data. There was, 8 to 10 big legacy processing companies. And I think we talked about it. Like, we were lazy. We sort of had it, right? Like, there was only so many players. It was like a group of payment companies, and, they weren't too adventurous, I wouldn't say. And I feel like it changed a lot there. If I took the First Data example, and people will know this technology, but back in 2012, 2013, we made an investment in buying a company called Clover. They wanted a payment platform. And today, if you go into a business, you got a pretty good chance of running into what Square evolved into. You'll see Square a lot, or Clover, which was First Data's sort of point of sale version. So I feel like you got a lot of new entrants that came in, and at the same time, it forced the incumbents to up their game. Like, just being a payment company wasn't good enough. And so, you see new technologies, new forms of payments. Clearly, we'll talk about, I run a salon. One of the things that's fascinating to me in that salon is how many people pay by Venmo or PayPal, right?
Yes.
Like, these kinds of forms of payments really weren't contemplated even as recently as, say, 10 years ago. It's that recent where you really didn't have as much diversity in payment types. So that's a big change. And I also think, for me, being on the inside, what a payments company is supposed to do. If you went back 10 years ago, it was, can you please make sure I can take a credit and a debit card transaction and I get paid? And that was I feel like that was the level of expectation you were going to get from a payment company. Whereas today, payment companies do marketing, they do working capital for clients, they do inventory, they do workforce management. I think it ties into one of the things I would tell you that I feel like has changed a lot is the verticalization of payments. Before, if you go back 10 years ago, much of payments was unbundled from software or a CRM. So if I'm running a flower shop and I have some florist CRM software running it, and that's just an example, of course, but back then it was like somebody had a credit card device, or they were running payments over here and they were running the rest of their business over here. There has been a lot of integration to where whatever software you're running on or your ERP has embedded payments right in it without going through two different transactions. And there's good and bad to that. I have my own opinions on sort of like the good and bad of that, but that's a big change. But where you see less and less just a standalone device that's not integrated into the point of sale.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say on that too is post-COVID. So there was sort of what happened towards the end of 2015 to 2020 with investment in new entrants into the payments world. And post-COVID, and this is something your consumers out there are going to relate to, two big things I see. Tipping. Tipping's out of control. No matter what we do as a consumer, they want to tip for some of the craziest things, right? So I don't know where that's going to end. I think there's frustration on the consumer part of being asked to tip for everything and anything in this day and age. That feels very much like a post-COVID thing to me. I don't recall that as much prior. And the payment companies are enabling these devices with pre-prompts to ask for tip for everything. The other one that also the consumer and the SMB, I guarantee have run into, is what's called cash discounting or dual pricing. And so if the easy example everybody runs into, I believe, would be petroleum. If you go to fill up your gas, you'll see on the sign a credit and a debit.
Oh, right.
Well, now if you go to your local sandwich shop or anything, the consumer is often being told like, hey, if you're going to use a credit card, there's going to be a 3% tariff on your purchase price. Whereas if you use cash or ACH or an alternative form, there is no tariff, I'll say, right? I have a sister who runs a German beer garden in Charlotte, and she would have never done any kind of surcharging or dual pricing. Post-COVID, her comment to me is, I'm trying to survive.
Right.
Run a business and survive and make payroll. And I see that becoming more and more ubiquitous post-COVID.
Yeah.
There's the obvious things with like tap on glass payments or things where you don't touch a device.
Yeah.
That obviously came out of COVID as well. But the ones, again, where I think everybody watching this podcast, whether you're a consumer, you own a business, this idea of charging the consumer 3% and the tip thing are phenomenons post-COVID.
Yeah. Now, you talked about the fact that when some of the investments started coming into the payment space, right, everybody needed to level up. They needed to do better. Have you seen shifts? So you talked about being just a few payments companies, kind of keeping it safe, not necessarily getting into fights. Did that change the dynamics in the market as far as who's competing, how many competitors there are?
Yeah, I think if you go to the processor level, right, processors pretty boring, right? They're the ones that run the payments. It's the non-sexy part of the business, but God forbid that money doesn't show up in the person's account. Then you're like a referee in a basketball game. If you're a payment company, if you did a good job, they never think about you. Yeah. If they're thinking about you, the referee, it's probably because you did a bad job. So it's sort of like table stakes, right? Payments. So there's big processing companies. First Data was the one I was at. They merged today. They're Fiserv. You had back 10 years ago, you had Vantiv and Global and Elevon and TSYS and WorldPay, FIS. Like there's about 10 big guys. There has been so much consolidation. Recently, Global Payments and WorldPay did a deal where, for all intents and purposes, Global Pay becomes the acquiring or payment processing side, and WorldPay is more of the issuing banking product side of it. But there's been massive consolidation at the processor level. There's been a lot of M&A to where companies have been bought. I just feel like, and then that verticalization, like I told you about, where now people, they used to go to their bank. If you or I 10 or 15 years ago were starting a business, there's a pretty good chance you're walking into Wells Fargo or B of A or wherever you bank, and opening up your, hair salon operating account. And oh, by the way, I want to take payments. That was sort of the central place where you thought about payment. Nowadays, the software company, because of that, what I talked earlier, where they're partnering with payment companies, embedding the payment module right into it, the software companies become a big point of sale for a small business owner or a business that needs to take payments. I don't know if it's good or bad. I said earlier, like the whole verticalization thing is a little tricky. And it's because if you think about, and we do it, by the way, we run a nail salon vertical market where we own the CRM, we own the payment platform, we own the hardware. That's a good thing for a small business, in as much as it's a more frictionless experience than cobbling together multiple vendors. If you can do a one-stop shop, one throat to choke, I like to call it, that can be good. Now, the downside I see is as things become more and more consolidated vertically is, in a way, those companies got you, because they're bringing so much value, which is a good thing. But similarly, they could do price actions where you wake up one day and you're paying way more than you ever were, because you're like, I can't undo what I did here. Everything is integrated. So I struggle with that a little bit. I mean, I don't want to call out companies. There's one in hospitality that's done a great job, by the way. I don't want to say their name, but I don't think people knew who they were 10 years ago. They went out with a price increase, I want to say it was a year or so ago, and there was an absolute revolt of what they were
Okay.
doing. And in that case, the company undid it. But what, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, all these hospitality venues are so embedded into this software, they might gripe, but they may capitulate also and have to accept it.
Yeah.
So that's the downside to me of the payment company being with the CRM, being with the vertical software.
Right.
Boy, once you go there, it's going to be hard to unring that bell.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I have to think is both sort of a moving target and the stakes have gone up as things have gotten increasingly digital is the security of all of these payments. Is that something that's an enormous challenge? Has there been a lot of change there?
All right. So your average SMB, at least in our portfolio, is, doing 500,000 to maybe 10 million in sales a year, 1 to 100 employees. And what they love to do is make pizza, sell jewelry, pet care. Things like breaches and data security, it is, and rightfully so. Like this is not, it may be top of mind, but I think they feel a little helpless, right?
Yeah.
So what we do, first of all, we obviously vet out every solution that we'll get behind and make sure that it's compliant, make sure that puts people in the best position to be compliant. There are processes and payments. Anybody who's been somebody who takes any kind of form of payment, card payments, probably knows these 3 dirty letters called PCI or SAQ, which stands for Self-Assessment Questionnaire. And this is a mandate from card brands where any merchant has to go in and say what do they do with data? Do you have cameras? And it's crazy, actually.
Okay.
Like, you got to have a degree from Harvard Business School, which even that might not do you any good trying to get through these things. But the point of those is to make sure that a merchant is, hopefully doing everything in there that they can to secure data. Tokenization is a big thing in the last 10 years. If you think about an example like your local gym, you may go in there with your card the first time you sign up and it's $59 a month or whatever, but they're generally going to recur bill you, right? So now they have your card in their software. Well, what happens is generally everything's tokenized these days. So even if a breach were to happen, hopefully, if you're in the right situation, all the person's going to get is a bunch of tokens that aren't going to be that useful for them. But I think of security that way, right? Protecting a client from ever being involved in a data breach. There's data breach products you can buy to give you insurance against a data breach. The other one, I don't know if it's security as much, but the other thing that can really drive a small business merchant or any size merchant crazy is chargebacks. So chargebacks, somebody goes and buys a piece of, like big ticket people really hate it up for a while, I'll say, but let's say somebody buys a piece of jewelry or an electronic, and then they call their issuing bank and say, I didn't buy that TV for $900. I'm charging it back. That's a horrific outcome for a merchant because the TV is sitting in somebody's living room. They don't have the product. And now they're being told by the issuing bank, this is the wrong card. For whatever reason it is, they claim the chargeback. Now the merchant is definitely, I would say, guilty until they can prove themselves innocent. The way it works in the card brands is the issuers run this place. MasterCard, these are the card issuers. They work with the banks to issue cards, and they're going to protect you, Kelly, as the card holder against the merchant. That's where it starts, which puts the merchant on the defensive. And in many cases, it's not legit, right? So we have tools in place that we partner with companies where the minute any kind of a chargeback happens, we'll immediately represent the receipt to the client and say, here you go. Do you not remember being at Best Buy? Sometimes it's innocent enough, right? Oh, that's right. I did buy a TV at Best Buy, right? Yeah. So we have put some tools in place to where you can mitigate that. But I will tell you, as you think about somebody who's responsible for picking a partner, chargebacks will absolutely drive people crazy. We're big in transportation. It's one of our verticals. So because with chargebacks and security and compliance, there's a big difference of if the card is present or if the card is not present. You took it over the phone.
Yeah.
Your ability to fight a chargeback and a not present, the onus on the merchant is even higher. to prove that.
Yeah.
So certain business types, like we're in transportation, people will rent a black car and then they'll claim they never got the black car service. Like it really irks business owners to get that. So
yeah. So we've talked a little bit about security. We've talked about things like the chargebacks, right? That you would want to know how your payments provider is handling those things. What are some of the other things that a small to mid-sized business should look for when they're selecting a payments provider?
the biggest thing to me, look, your average small business owner doesn't have like accountants and lawyers on staff. Some of your enterprise, your Walmarts and Best Buys and McDonald's, clearly they do have the back office services. But your typical SMB is not sitting there with like attorneys and accountants. I'm going to say this as a guy who's been in this business for 30 years. I tell people sometimes we're like maybe above used car salesmen. I'm not sure. Maybe we're one rung above or below. And I don't think like all companies are like that. I think it's gotten better, but there are payment companies out there that really lack transparency. So this is what I would say. Obviously, I think if you ask me why do people leave a company, it's because it's priced too high, they have the wrong solution, or customer service is terrible, or they went out of business, unaddressable. So those first 3 points, whoever's obviously, picking the solution has to be sure. I like to say like that whoever they're talking to isn't selling them the solution. They're acting as a consultant. Many people on the payment side only have one option. Wherever they send their business, like if they're a Fiserv, they're going to probably sell Clover because that's all they got.
Yeah.
That's the platform. So hopefully you're talking to people who have different solutions and they're not routing you down one path from the get-go. But a big one is the agreement itself. And I hate to bring it into legal terms, but the fact of the matter is a lot of merchants will either negotiate price or get to the solution. And then when the contract comes, they don't spend a lot of time on it. Personally, unless it's a big enterprise client where you have these master service agreements that can be 3-5 years, because a lot of effort goes into getting a big client like that. Yeah. If you're an SMB, I would look for no term in your agreement with little to no cancellation fee. I've seen agreements that are generally, I would just say I'm aghast when I see what the penalty is to like leave. I don't like that, right? So I would, number one, look for an agreement where if you can negotiate month to month, and many companies will do month to month. They're going to earn the business versus locking you in. The other one I see horrific outcomes is leasing. I'm not down on leasing generally, but there are entities in this payments ecosystem where they'll give you a great payment deal and they will crush you on a 48-month lease where there's not great outs. So I'm generally like, you should be able to buy it or finance it without getting into long-term leases. I see a lot of just not good things. But there's a program guide. It's all the rights you have. And it's one of these crazy where it's 14 pages long, fine print. But, it does tell you what your rights are. And maybe testimonials, just like anything in business, any sourcing you're going to do. Like in our industry, I'll see salespeople go, we got great customer service. I say, which of your competitors is going to tell the client they don't have great customer service? Yeah. How do you prove that actually? It's almost a throwaway. However, if you have clients that are in that vertical or whatnot, that you could send them to say, go talk to so-and-so, maybe your reputation precedes you in that way, but it is tricky. You got to really look at it. I think the term of the contract is the one, like the term and what is the exit clause. Those are two big things contractually I would really look for in an agreement. And why is somebody locking you into, if you're a pizza shop, why are they locking you into a 5-year agreement with some crazy exit clause? It just doesn't have to be that way. So for that.
Now, as a payment solution, let's stay with the pizza shop. So we've put in the payment solution and hopefully are starting to get some more transparency into the payments. What might be some of the things that a business will start to realize once they get this different look?
Honestly, I would say how complex payments is. Yeah. People will be able to relate to this when you get your first statement. So there's 2 forms of pricing that I can get with today. One is flat rate. So, okay, you're going to charge me 3%. I know what it is. If I do $10,000, I'm going to have a $300 bill. I hope I did that math right, but you get the point. It's flat rate, right?
Yeah.
The other is something that's called interchange plus, which is very prevalent. And it's where the cost. So back to what do they realize when you get into payments? You realize that every card that somebody could present you in that pizza shop could have a completely different cost for you to accept it. I don't
Okay.
think like from the outside looking in, people go, oh, it's a MasterCard, it's a American Express, it's a debit card, it's somebody with rewards on it. All of those cards is called interchange. And if anybody wants to know the crux of pricing and payments, go to Visa, MasterCard interchange, and it'll just have pages of different cards that are issued. And when somebody presents that card in your store, that's the cost.
Okay.
That's called Interchange Plus, where the payments people were like, we can't explain every one of these. And there's new cards introduced all the time. So they'll just say, whatever card you take, we'll pass that through, and then 0.5% or something, right? While that, I do recommend those two forms of billing. I think what happens to people is when they see something like Interchange Plus and realize how complicated it is and who's charging me for what, that I think is an eye opener. The chargebacks that I talked about. When you're running a business, like my wife and I have a couple nail salons here in Vegas, and like nail salons, the last place I would think somebody's charging back. But yet, inevitably, once a quarter, somebody says that whatever, the service wasn't good and they charge it back. I think that is an eye opener for people who've never run a business before, that they're, I can get charged back. I mentioned earlier, and you end up on the defensive. Unfortunately, with payments, to me, it starts at the card brands. It's already complicated with the cost of cards, and that just trickles all the way down to the merchant level.
Yeah.
And so doing a little bit of research today, obviously, like anything, there's more knowledge bases out there you can study up on, but it's like anything, until you get punched in the head one time, your first chargeback, you're like, oh, I think I studied up on that, but now it's real.
And now it's personal.
You only have a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Try to, and you got to have certain documents to defend it, right? So you almost have to go through it one time to realize. So yeah, transparency is a double-edged sword. You want it, but boy, when you see it in payments, how complicated it is, you almost wish you didn't know.
Now, one of the other things that I want to ask you, a lot of the examples that we've used today are the kind of small business that we would all visit as consumers: pizza shops, florists, nail salons, right? That kind of thing. Yeah. But there's also been a huge trend of large enterprises trying to do business with small to mid-sized suppliers, either because they're innovative, maybe they have diversity targets, maybe they're trying to, look at their local community, who are then their target customers, and say, okay, let's work with somebody local, keep some of this money in the community. Payments is huge because a large enterprise typically has the advantage when you're negotiating payment terms. What do you think it's important for people working in large corporations to know about the cash position of most of these small to mid-sized businesses?
Yeah. So first of all, I think of this one as the devil you know versus the underdog you want to know. Like, I'm an underdog guy by nature. I'm a small business. I would much rather do business with my vendors who are ABC vendor, who are scrapping and clawing and fighting and want to break through, than the devil I know. It's safer. The big company, public company, I can look at the financials and know they're not going out of business tomorrow. And it's fair. Like, that's a fair thing, because depending on where you're at in your evolution, and I definitely have experience with this at Aurora, where we've taken some chances with what I would call underdogs, and it didn't work out. Actually, I regretted that I didn't go to the establishment in that case. And there's others where it has worked out. And I don't know, maybe it's a spiritual thing. It makes me feel better or something, like helping somebody out that way versus does the big guy really need my business? Because that's the other thing. If you think you're a big business and you go to a Fiserv or a Global or something like that, or WorldPay, do they really care about your business? Whereas the scrappy underdog, it may mean the world to them. It's a tough one, but the financial thing, and I'll tie this financial piece back to what we do. I recall 1995, again, this completely green kid running around, and I got an opportunity with a company called Cintas, like the clothing or the uniforms and whatnot, right? And my underwriter wouldn't do the deal, and I'm like, wait, I'm watching the Cincinnati Reds game. They're right behind home plate. How is that possible? And it was all about future delivery. In our industry, a business that takes payment today for something that hasn't happened yet creates a lot of risk. Whereas a restaurant, there's almost no risk. They went in, if the taco was bad, they're going to argue it right then and there. They're not going to wait 6 months and charge you back or whatever, right? So the whole risk profile is different. However, because we take risk on every business we do business with. If they go bad, they go out of business, and they have, like I said, future delivery. Imagine a cruise line where they have 6 months of cruises and the cruise line goes bankrupt.
Yeah.
Whoever the processor is owns that, has to pay all those cardholders back. So there's a whole risk reward. And in some cases with ours, we'll do periodic review. Like, just because we underwrote you today, every 6 months, we're checking, to your point, your financial condition to see what if something does go wrong? Are you going to be in a position to survive that? From a sourcing perspective, financing's one, obviously, with current events, what's real to everybody and to smart people. They always probably thought about this, but tariffs. Yep. Do I want to go into China, or do I want to source out of California? Because political things, my dev team, or Aurora's dev team back in 2022 is in Ukraine. So when you think about all the things they don't teach you in the CEO business school.
Yeah, dealing with war.
It was my CTO calling me in January saying, I think there might be a war going on here in Ukraine. Yeah. I was like, nah, like cooler heads will prevail. It can't be. But to his credit, we did about 2 weeks diligence in Poland and Turkey and relocating people. We knew all of our dev people, whether they could exit Ukraine. Obviously, like 28-year-old men were going to have a harder time.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So we did all that work. So in retrospect, it was like, do I go and re-up the Ukraine dev team? And you know what? The day of the war, they all showed up the next morning, like, I think 80%. And I was like, wow. And it was like that. I give them crazy credit. These people never stopped, and bombs are going off. I don't know what I would have done. But the point is, like, now you got to think about these macro things when you're going to go get a dev team. Is it safer to go to India or Poland, a NATO? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, all of that, financial condition, geography, do they have the wherewithal to sustain themselves for 6 to 12 months if something goes bad? It all goes in the equation. And unfortunately, I feel like, as we discuss this, it leans to the devil we know, the incumbent, which I hate.
Right.
I want that, underdog small business to do it. But the easy thing is to always default to the devil, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, Brian, as we start to wind down this conversation, I want to bring you in on a tradition we have here at the Sourcing Hero. So I'm going to give you 2 questions. You can pick either one, and every single answer I have heard to date has been right. I have high level of confidence your answer is also going to be right. But your options are either, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? Or what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
First of all, I hated this exercise. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, man, these
you haven't done it yet. You can't have hated it.
Tough, like very high level questions that it's, when I hear heroism, right? Like, I don't even want to answer anything I do with the word heroism because it doesn't rise to that level. But I get the point, right? In the context of, helping small businesses and whatnot. I mentioned to you in the prep here, ironically, my son is in town. I flew him into Vegas. I'm a big UFC fan. I wanted to bring him he's a senior at Ohio State this year, and he's doing an internship with Ross, the retailer in New York City, in sourcing and logistics. That's his major.
That's fantastic.
Said, Connor, how would you answer I'm trying to pass the buck. I'm like, I don't want to have to answer this. What would you say, right? But I'll answer the second one, the heroism one. Sure. And again, heroism is just not, for me, the right word. But what we aspire to do at a place like Aurora is to think about a small business owner and everything they go through. They're trying to pay bills week to week. Most small businesses, which, by the way, I think the recent stats, 95 to 99% of the businesses in this country are, in fact, defined as small businesses, and they employ.
Oh, it's the vast majority of the country. Yeah, for small business.
And they are fighting it out week to week. We see a lot of them ask us for working capital because their bank won't give it to them, right? It's a grind. And then nail industry, you're dealing with personalities half the time where, you're a psychologist, right? Restaurant industry, I'm pretty sure they go through the same thing, right? There's a lot of trials and travails of being a small business owner, but it's a great job. So for me, I'll use that nail example where we invested in a company called Nailsoft, which is the CRM that runs it, the scheduling and all the things that go on. And we own the payment company. We bolt that together. And to me, we're not a vendor. I don't think in the Nailsoft industry we're a vendor. I think of us as a partner of that business. And that's what payment companies should aspire to is doing much more than securing a credit or a debit transaction. The more you can do to help that person focus on doing nails or making pizza, the things they really love to do, and solve in a simplistic way, because it is complicated.
Yeah.
I think that's where, again, heroism is the wrong word, but we inject ourselves where there's a sense of pride. Like when a business can rely on us to help them grow their business. That's one way I think about it. And the other way for me personally is just, as the CEO of the company, is my employees. How can I help each of them build their brand? How can I have empathy in a world where I'm responsible for shareholder value? And it's a battle. Listen, I struggle with it. I'm sure every CEO, we're private equity backed, so maybe it's a higher bar or a public company, but that struggle is real. Like, you got to make profits, but at the same time, being empathetic to your workforce, trying to grow those folks, help them build their own personal brand, have passion for what they do and feel important. Like it's that SMB helping them out, and the employees, especially now. Like, I'm sure it was 10 years ago, but the cost of stuff now, like I go to get a burrito at Chipotle, it's $16. How do people, you're making 70 grand a year with a couple kids. Like, how do you do it? So I don't know. I hope CEOs have empathy. You hear about cuts, and look, there's real reasons for cuts. I can't say there aren't, but sometimes being a hero, it's like a silent hero. You're doing the best behind the scenes to mitigate what could be a bad situation. So I told you I hated that question.
You did good though. You did a good job. You got your son in there. And I do think, to your point about silent heroism, right? Like, in most cases, if you're doing something truly unique or remarkable in a business, first of all, you don't have time to talk about it. You're too busy doing it, right? But it's the people that are sort of oriented that way that take that approach to their work. Brian, if people are meeting you for the first time through this conversation, they want to connect with you, they want to learn more about Aurora Payments, maybe they want to go to a UFC fight if they're in Vegas.
I recommend it.
What would be the best way for them to get in touch?
Our website is risewithaurora.com. So to learn more about the company there, I'm on LinkedIn. You can learn more about me there, but risewithaurora.com is where we're located at.
Awesome. Brian, thank you so much.
Yes, Kelly, thanks so much. Go Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well, and always remember that you can be a hero too.